In May 2015, when the president's administration kicked off, the CBN's loans to the federal government was 789.7 billion naira. It rose to 856 billion naira as of December 2015, 2.2 trillion naira in December 2016, and 3.3 trillion naira by December 2017. It continued to rise every year, 5.4 trillion by 2018, 8.7 in 2019, 13.1 trillion naira in December 2020, 17.4 trillion naira in December 2021, and 23.8 trillion naira in December 2022. On the 31st of January 2023, the House of Representatives approved the president's request to secure an additional 1 trillion naira loan from the Central Bank of Nigeria to fund the 2022 supplementary budget. Staggering figures there. Of course, in May 2023, the Senate again approved the request of the president to borrow 22.7 trillion naira from the Central Bank of Nigeria through its Ways and Means provision, which is a short-term or emergency finance. And of course, again, like we have, of course, recorded May 10th, 2023, President Buhari wrote again to the Senate seeking the Honorable House to approve a new loan of $800 million from the World Bank for the purpose of scaling up the National Social Safety Net Program. And of course, I'm sure our guests will be able to break down what exactly the National Social Safety Net Program is. Our guest this morning, Nemeka Obiariri, is a political and economic analyst. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I think it was former Senator Shehu Sani who tweeted that the only loans that the current National Assembly would not approve of from President Muhammadu Buhari are the loans that he had. Well, I mean, the only time they will not approve loans is when the Ninth National Assembly is over and President Buhari is in Daura. So it's back-to-back approval of loans. Of course, SERAP and other bodies have condemned this continued borrowing. Can you tell us, what your thoughts are with this new $800 million loan request?
To be very honest with you, it does not make sense. First of all, the Buhari regime, as at now, should be rounding up. I'm seeking to borrow $800 million. And if you look at the intent and purpose, as part of safety net, to share it to 50 million housing units, people, does not make sense. We've raised this issue of the borrowing. Debt itself is not a bad thing, but when you borrow, there must be a purpose. If you go to any bank to go and borrow money, first of all, the bank will want to know the purpose for which you are borrowing. The bank will want to know clearly the cash flows, the things that you will do with those monies that will enable you to raise profit to be able to cover the loan and repayment. In the case of Nigeria, 2015, June 30th, if you look at the records at the DMO, total debt was about 12 trillion nationwide. The monies at the CBN, debts by where and means was about 789 billion naira. Today, we have cumulative of almost 77 trillion naira debt. We're not even talking about 11.6 trillion that is by way of contractors' liability that they've not yet paid. And the borrowing $800 million, if you look at the numbers clearly, it does not make sense. If you remove subsidy, which they said, okay, they're borrowing to be able to take care of the impact of subsidy, you will clearly see that if you remove subsidy today based on the global prices of the gasoline, which is the PMS, which is the only product that is not deregulated, it will interest you to know that the diesel, the AGO, is fully deregulated. The kerosene, which is actually used by households to cook in the villages, which is actually the one that actually serve the poor, is fully deregulated. It's actually selling for 770 naira per liter. So they are borrowing $800 million. If you divide it using the official rates, we're talking about 11,000 naira per household. What will be the impact? Nothing. This is not the first time this government, I think what they're trying to do is to go on the last borrowing spree to share the money and loot it as usual without apologies. In this same country, in 2020 when we had COVID, we were in lockdown, kids were at home. Yeah, this same government claimed that they spent over 120 billion feeding those kids who were at home in school.
Remember?
Yes, so that is how low and how despicable we've sunk. If they actually want to take care of the poor, one of the sustainable development goals is zero poverty. And the poor actually in Nigeria, we have 1.3 million multidimensional poor Nigerians. And I won't stop mentioning this. In Nigeria today, over 176 million Nigerians cannot comfortably take care of themselves without borrowing without begging, and without humiliating themselves. And this is a country that ticks the right boxes not to have anything more than 5% poverty rate if we do the right things. We've done proposals severally to this government, this particular Buhari government, on what they can do. Why are we still at this level? In 2016, when the crude oil prices crashed, there was a global window for them to have removed subsidy. What we are witnessing today is cumulative actions, inefficiency, incompetency, and deliberate attempt to create a Ponzi and OPEC system that enable them to steal and to loot. In fact, I even want to believe that the oil and gas industry is actually the golden egg. Most successive government, they just come in, they want to retain the opacity to enable them. That's the only way they can steal and loot. I'll give you an example. Removing subsidy, deregulating the market, will save us over 18 trillion naira annually. The records are there. For the first time in the history of this country, under the Jonathan's government, we were producing average of 2 million, 2.2, 2.3 million barrels a day. And even the APC government in 2014 accused the Jonathan government of stealing 400,000 barrels of crude every day. The GMD of NNPC, Melekiare, on Arise TV mentioned clearly that on a monthly basis, Nigeria loses about $1.9 billion from crude oil theft. That is $22 billion conservatively every year. We waste over 7 trillion naira annually on subsidies. These are not part. The losses at the NNPC, at the refineries are not included, and these are deliberate because they know clearly. We've argued. Some people, you cannot remove subsidy unless you privatize, unless you begin to produce. For 8 years, one of those refineries, if you look at the history of refinery in Nigeria, from 1969 to 1986, a period of 17 years, Nigeria built 3 brand new refineries with combined capacity of 445,000 barrels refining capacity a day. In fact, under Obasanjo, we built a brand new refinery in 3 years. But in 8 years, this government could not repair any of those refineries, and which is very instructive. Now, if we had, and it's not yet late, if we had regulated that market, liberalized the oil and gas sector, both the upstream and downstream, allow subsidy to go, by now we will have had many modular refineries in place that will have helped us to cover the gap. And the 18 trillion naira we will save annually if we apply just 50% of it to put in place the scientific palliatives. If you time will permit, now I will explain this. This country will not have any reason to be borrowing $800 million.
So now that you've mentioned that we could save 18 trillion naira every year if we remove subsidy, one of the reasons the government is seeking to borrow $800 million is to cushion the effects of the removal of subsidy. So would it make sense if the government argues that we're only just taking $800 million now to cushion the effects, and of course by the time, subsidy is removed, we'll save this 18 trillion naira and, it will be smooth sailing from there. Would that make any sense?
It does not make any sense. If you remove subsidy on PMS now, the next day, we are subsidizing at 185 naira per litre at the filling stations. It will go to 450 naira per litre. 11,000 naira a month for a household who will not even tick anything. And why are we even deceiving ourselves here? Also, let me tell you, in Nigeria, they want 33 million multidimensional poor Nigerians. They argue that, yes, price or cost of transport will go up. But are you aware that most of the articulated vehicles that move food commodities from the hinterlands to the urban areas are actually using diesel? They use diesel. They don't use PMS. Okay. Most of the articulated trucks, the 911, the trailers, use diesel. And the cost, if you watch, over the last 1 year, food inflation had gone up. And one of the reasons was because the price of the AGO moved. In fact, from 2016 till now, the AGO had moved from 90 naira per litre to the currency 150 naira per litre. In fact, that was the time it got to about 900 naira per litre. So those things are factored in. If we actually want to stop poverty in Nigeria, we know what to do, not borrowing. After all, we have go and check the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, how many trillions they've wasted doing palliative. And you know, interesting thing, in 2015, we had only 76 million extreme poor Nigerians. We had 10.5 million kids out of school. They said they are going to be doing safety net. Their safety net had only helped to create more poverty because we are now from 75 million to want, if a man continues to do a thing that is not working and he keeps on doing it and it's not working, it keeps on bringing, don't you know that it is wickedness to keep on doing it?
So what, help me understand, and for our viewers across the continent, what would make a government that is about 20 days away from leaving office to still be seeking an $800 million loan? And then second, the current National Assembly has almost never rejected any offers from President Muhammadu Buhari. They've never looked at any of these figures, any of all these loans and said, no, this is too much. Does it seem like they're working hand in hand and they do not understand that these, moves aren't working?
To be honest with you, without being rude, the 9th National Assembly is the most useless we've ever had in this country. Very useless. In fact, they are like a rubber stamp, an appendage of the executive. It does not make sense. How can you be approving $800 million at the twilight of a government? And it does not make sense. Okay, now I want to ask you, where is the register of the 50 million housing units? Where is the register? The other time they told us that they spent 5.9 billion training 16,000 kids to learn how to repair phones. And that's an average of about 350,000 naira per person. Please, can they produce a register of the 16,000 people? Their name, their phone number, where their shops are, and how the 5.9 billion naira was spent? It's a simple question. They said, how did they even document the 50 million households?
Is there still an Auditor General's office in Nigeria?
My brother, it's shocking because, I sometimes I sit down and I wonder the kind of country. You said you want to provide palliative for 50 million house units. Where is the register of the 50 million poor units? There must be a register. You can't just wake up and say, I want to go and feed 1 million kids. There must be a register. And in this National Assembly that keeps on approving these things, never for one day. I've never heard it or read it anywhere. Where the Senate or the rep have asked these guys, can we have a register of the 16,000 people that we took 5.9 billion naira from our resources to train on how to do? The other day, you saw the Air Nigeria. They spent $11 million doing logo. That's the kind of country. And let me tell you, this country has no business housing the number of extreme poor that we have here. In 1990, from 1990 to 2015, the number of extreme poor in the world have been halved. But in Nigeria, it has grown. In 1980, we had only 4 million extreme poor Nigerians. China had 765 million. Today, China had removed most of those numbers from extreme poverty. Nigeria has moved from 4 million to 1.3 million. And these guys, it's as if we are under a spell. Most Nigerians don't even ask questions. And they keep on doing it. There is no compassion. They just do it. You see, sometimes I begin to wonder, is there any DNA of the average Nigerian political class that just tell them to just go there, loot, kill, destroy?
All right, Mr. Buhari, let's bring in Olive here. And just to bear in mind, to add to one of the things you mentioned, Hadi Sirika also mentioned that the government had spent 12 billion naira to buy 10 fire trucks. Olive?
Yes, very important point you've mentioned there as to accountability for the monies that have been spent in the past. Now, according to the letter that was read at the plenary, it was said that this $800 million apparently would be used to give 5,000 naira for a period of 6 months to 10.2 million low-income households, which would have a multiplier effect on about 60 million Nigerians. Now, the question would be, how do we determine who are the beneficiaries of this? For accountability, they have said that they would ensure that it is transferred directly to their bank accounts. We know that Nigeria has had a challenge when it comes to data collation. So how can we guarantee, if this goes through, how can we guarantee that these monies will get to the people that they are assigned for? That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, we're talking about subsidy in a few weeks and the effect that it would have. How can the effect be cushioned? How can Nigerians even be prepared for what is going to come after subsidy removal? Yes, we talk about the positives, but then we're grappling with poverty, multifaceted and multidimensional poverty. How are Nigerians going to be able to cope once subsidy is lifted?
Olive, the truth remains, over the last 8 years, we've always talked about taking care of the poor, caring for the poor, providing for the poor, doing palliative for the poor and whatever. And for the past 8 years, we've grown the number of extreme poor people from 76 million to 133 million. We've grown the number of out-of-school kids from 10.5 to 20 million. And now, see, if I am the president, the first thing I would do on day one is to remove subsidy. Now, let me tell you why people are against the removal of subsidy. Most people who are against the removal of subsidy have always argued towards this end. Why have we not? We've promised we're going to take the poor out of the poverty zone. Today, the number has increased. How are we sure that if we remove subsidy, the savings will be looted and shared among the same elitist class? And it's very simple. We've done a proposal on this. Removal of subsidy today, it's not just enough to remove subsidy. You remove subsidy, you have to deregulate all the value chain of the oil and gas industry. You have to privatize those refineries. It shocks you. It shocks me. Do you know that between 2015 till now, we have wasted over 900 billion naira reported as losses at those refineries that are producing nothing. On an annual basis, we spend over 67 billion naira paying people who do not refine anything because of the incompetence and responsibility of those in power. If we want to remove subsidy, the following things must be done. First of all, as we are removing subsidy, we are fully deregulating the whole value chain. We are privatizing those refineries and handing them over to deep-pocketed private sector investors that can manage them. South Africa has over 540,000 barrels capacity refineries in South Africa. Some of them owned by Chevron, by Total, and by Shell. South Africa doesn't even produce even 100 of the kind of crude we produce here. Where are those guys in those climes? They are there because the market is transparent, there are no subsidies, things are done in a way that there are no opacity. Number 3, NNPC claim they are now a limited liability company. They are not. If you look at NLNG and how NLNG functions, they are the only subsidiary or any national corporation that does not have the kind of corruption that we have as we have in NNPC and others. We have to adopt that model. Then on the upstream, the federal government of Nigeria must take steps. Under the JV arrangement, we must divest down in such a way that the JVs will now become incorporated. And our divestiture should be in a way that local corporates should be able to buy up those 10% or 20%. The NNPC will be divesting from the IJVs with likes of Chevron, with likes of Shell, and with likes of ExxonMobil. And most importantly, whatever savings that must come with the removal of subsidy must be placed under the management of Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Authority. Like I said, if we remove subsidy, 18 trillion will be saved. Which is simply, if we remove 50% of that savings and put with the Sovereign Wealth Authority, the extra 9 trillion can enable each state to get extra 10 billion naira every month. With the 9 trillion that we are going to be saved, we can now, we say we are going to borrow. We can now borrow against those receivables. And if we take 1.5 trillion naira today, borrowing against those receivables, we can be able to get enough palliative. And what are those palliatives? 18,000 18-seater buses, 24 per local government areas under a PPP framework, and other things.
Mr. Abiari, if we're out of time, if we can respond to this in 1 minute. I was going to say that the government is borrowing, of course. There's going to be a new government sworn in on the 29th of May. Of course, there's still a tribunal, but the president-elect so far, which might maybe comfort Nigerians that these economic challenges and the borrowing would end soon, because he is currently out of the country to meet investors and also bring goodies back to Nigeria. So I want you to quickly just respond to this very short trip that President-elect has taken to meet potential investors.
Potential investors as what? As president sworn in? Do we have 2 presidents in Nigeria? It does. You see, let us be honest with ourselves. We have an existing president who is still in office. Buhari's tenure ends on 29th of May. So the idea of the president-elect, I think there is more to this than going to look for investors. Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not a new face in Nigeria. You don't need to travel to get investors. Like I said to anybody who cares listening, Nigeria ticks the right boxes. If we put in place the right physical, monetary, socio-economic, and security architecture in place, programs and policies, investors will troop into Nigeria. But as long as we have insecurity, we have physical and monetary deformity, and we have incompetencies across the 3 tiers of government. Most of the MDAs are occupied with people who are not passionately creative, who are not sincere, who are not patriotic. So people just see government as an avenue to go there, steal, share, and loot. As long as we don't put in place the right physical, monetary, socio-economic, and security architecture in Nigeria, investors will not come, even if you tie them with long rope.
Nnameka Obiari, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure. I know it was very interesting speaking with you on these issues. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, my brother.